The weapon maintenance bay was never a place meant for wandering eyes or idle footsteps. It stood at the very heart of a naval facility where silence was as heavy as the reinforced concrete walls, and every breath seemed monitored by unseen sentinels. Robert Hale, commander with 15 years of service carved into his posture, had walked those halls countless times. Yet this day felt different. A shiver of wrongness sliding down his spine as his boots struck the polished floor. He had just left a routine briefing, mind still swimming in tactical details and operational reports, when a faint sound of movement drew his attention. It came from the bay, a sound he knew well, the careful dismantling of steel, the click of precision instruments, the rhythm of maintenance, but it was out of place, for no one was scheduled to be in there at this hour, and even if they were, every single person required clearance layers upon layers deep. Through the narrow pane of reinforced glass, Robert's eyes narrowed. There she was, a woman who clearly did not belong. Auburn hair tied neatly back, clothes too ordinary for a place where uniforms and regulation dictated appearance. She moved with a calmness that defied the alarms screaming in his head, her hands steady as she cleaned the barrel of a massive rifle resting on the table before her. The sight made his stomach drop. He knew the profile of that weapon instantly. A sniper system of the highest restriction. A tool so lethal and so tightly controlled it was tracked like nuclear material. No civilian, no outsider should have ever been within 5 miles of it. Yet here she sat, running a cloth across its components as though she were polishing silverware in her kitchen. Robert pushed open the heavy steel door, the echo of its hinges carrying across the bay. The woman did not flinch, did not even glance up, her focus locked on the gleaming steel in her hands. "You are not authorized to be here," he said, his voice sharp but steady, honed from years of command. "I know," she answered softly, the words flowing out as if they carried no weight, as if the statement itself was as mundane as acknowledging the weather. She continued to polish the rifle's chamber, her movements deliberate, practiced, too precise to belong to a stranger. Robert's pulse quickened. This was not an accident, not a lost civilian who had stumbled past a door she should not have found. This was intentional, and the calmness in her posture suggested she knew far more than she should. He stepped closer, scanning the room automatically, corners, exits, terminals. No one else was present. The hum of fluorescent lights above filled the silence. "This area requires the highest clearance," he said, each word heavy. "Who are you, and how did you get inside?" She finally set down the tool in her hand and glanced up, eyes dark and steady, the kind of eyes he had only seen in soldiers who had faced impossible odds. Yet she wore no insignia, no uniform, nothing to mark her allegiance. "Someone who knows this weapon must be ready within hours," she replied, her voice still maddeningly calm. Robert clenched his jaw. This was madness. Protocol dictated that he should already have sounded the alarm, secured her, dragged her before command, yet something about her poise made him hesitate. This was no ordinary breach, no reckless intruder. He activated the bay's internal lock, sealing them inside. "Tell me your name," he demanded. "For today you can call me Sophia," she said, lifting the rifle's bolt and examining it with meticulous care. "Tomorrow, I may be someone else entirely." The casualness of her words unsettled him more than shouting ever could have. She carried herself with a certainty, as though she had been in this room 100 times before, as though the rifle on the table was less a weapon and more a part of her own body. Robert's mind raced. The facility was a fortress. Biometric scans, coded entries, armed guards, multiple redundancies. None of it explained how she was sitting here as if invited. Yet here she was speaking to him as though she had anticipated his arrival. "You should not know my name," Robert said cautiously. She smiled faintly, not with arrogance, but with the ease of someone who had long ago stopped fearing walls of secrecy. "The same way I know this rifle has not been serviced properly in months, Commander." His chest tightened. Those records were buried deep, hidden behind classified levels even many senior officers could not reach. The fact that she spoke them aloud was a violation of reality itself. Robert took another step forward, studying her hands, the scars across her knuckles, the calluses that told of countless hours spent handling weapons. These were not the hands of an office worker or civilian. They were the hands of someone forged by steel and gunpowder. What unsettled him most was not her presence, but the feeling blooming in his chest, a reluctant recognition that the woman before him was not lost, not reckless, not mistaken. She was here because she was meant to be, and for reasons he could not yet understand. He felt certain that whatever mission she carried on her shoulders was heavier than anything written in his orders. Robert's instinct screamed that he should shut this down, call in security, and have Sophia restrained, yet his years in the field had taught him something far more valuable than rigid obedience. He had learned to listen when reality bent in unexpected ways, to recognize the difference between a breach of protocol and the arrival of something beyond his clearance. The woman's calmness was unbearable. She cleaned the scope with such delicate precision that it seemed less like maintenance and more like ritual. Robert's gaze stayed fixed on her hands, the certainty of every movement, the measured pace, the absence of hesitation. "You broke into the most secure facility in the state," Robert said, his voice low but hard. "Tell me how you did it." She glanced at him only briefly before turning back to the rifle, as if the answer mattered little. "I walked in." Robert's chest tightened. Her tone was maddeningly casual, her words stripped of fear or defiance, as if she were commenting on the taste of a meal. "That is impossible," he said firmly. "Entry here requires more than a key card, more than clearance. There are layers of checks, biometric scans, escorts. Every wall is a barrier." "Yes," Sophia murmured, "and yet here I am." Robert scanned the room again, his pulse thudding in his ears. There were no guards rushing in, no alarms blaring, only the faint hum of machinery and the woman's steady rhythm as she reassembled the bolt. The fact that no alarms had triggered was itself an impossibility. His thoughts raced to the rifle. He recognized the model, a massive sniper system known for its terrifying power, a weapon tracked with the same obsession as nuclear warheads, and she handled it as though it were an old companion. Robert forced himself to stay calm. "Give me one reason why I should not place you under arrest this instant." Sophia looked up, her dark eyes locking with his, and in that moment he felt an unsettling shift. Not intimidation, but recognition, as though she saw through him, through the uniform, through the walls of secrecy, to something far more personal. "Before you sound alarms," she said, "perhaps you should check the service logs for this particular rifle." Robert froze. Her knowledge of its existence alone was shocking, but her confidence suggested she knew more, much more. "You cannot possibly have access to that information," he said slowly. Sophia leaned closer to the weapon, running a fingertip across the gleaming chamber, her voice a steady murmur. "Terminal 7. Access code Delta 77 Alpha. Password is your mother's maiden name, followed by the year you graduated from training." Robert's jaw went slack, his breath caught in his chest. Those details, those codes, they were known to fewer than half a dozen people in the entire force, updated monthly under protocols so tightly wound that even generals did not always see them. "That is not possible," he whispered. "Check it," she said simply, her attention already back on the scope. Every fiber of his training screamed, not to, that using an unverified code from a stranger was madness. But something in her certainty gnawed at him. Against instinct, he strode to the computer terminal mounted in the bay, keyed in his clearance, and hesitated, fingers hovering over the input. Then he typed the sequence exactly as she had spoken. The screen flickered, then split open into files he had never seen before. His breath quickened as he scrolled. His name reflected faintly on the glass as classified records filled the screen. There it was, a record tied to the very rifle on the table. Active deployment status. Operational notes redacted. But the engagement record was unmistakable. 73 confirmed eliminations. Maximum range noted at over 3,000 meters, and a maintenance delay flagged 8 months overdue. Robert felt the world tilt, his mind struggling to reconcile what he read. These were distances bordering on the impossible, shots that no ordinary sniper could hope to make. He turned back towards Sophia, his face pale. "This is beyond reason. No one makes consistent shots at that range. the math alone defies possibility. Sophia's voice was steady. Muzzle velocity, 850 meters per second. Bullet drop at that distance, just under 70 feet. Wind drift requires real-time atmospheric data, humidity, pressure, target movement, all factored into every shot. Robert stared at her. She recited calculations as if reading a grocery list. Her certainty more terrifying than if she had shouted. She spoke as someone who had done this before. Not once, but countless times. "You are describing the work of a machine," he said quietly. She looked up, and her dark eyes met his again. "No, Commander, the work of someone who knows survival depends on precision." Robert's mouth went dry. He was staring not at a trespasser, but at someone whose existence itself was buried under levels of secrecy beyond his reach. Someone compartmentalized so deeply she could walk unseen through the very heart of the military's most sacred halls. "Tell me your real name," Robert demanded. Sophia smiled faintly. "Today, I am Sophia. Tomorrow, I may be the one who takes the shot no one else can." The words sank into him like ice. She was not bluffing. He could feel it, his entire understanding of rules and protocols crumbling around the weight of her presence. Robert remained frozen beside the glowing terminal, his eyes darting between the classified records and the woman polishing steel at the table. His instincts rebelled. This situation should have ended with alarms, restraints, and endless reports. Yet some voice deeper than training urged him to pause, to listen, to understand. The bay was silent, but for the soft click of components sliding into place. Sophia's hands moved as though guided by memory older than the weapon itself. The rifle was becoming whole again, reassembled under her practiced rhythm. She worked not with haste, but with absolute devotion. "You should not exist," Robert muttered, his voice barely audible. Sophia's lips curved faintly, as if at an old secret. "Existence is a word for official records. Commander, sometimes the world requires people who live outside of those lines, people whose names never make it on a paper." Robert straightened his shoulders, frustration rising in him. "You're telling me you operate without recognition, without oversight, without any record of what you do. That is not service, that is shadow." Sophia finally paused, setting down the bolt carrier. She met his eyes. "Shadow is often where the hardest work must be done. Do you believe every threat fits neatly into reports and briefings? Do you believe every operation can be explained to committees and journalists?" Her words cut deeper than he wanted to admit. He had seen operations that never reached the evening news, missions where survival required choices that would never be written down. He knew the weight of those silences, but she seemed to embody them. Robert crossed his arms. 73 confirmed eliminations. That is what the record says. Is it true? Sophia's gaze did not waver. Records show what they are allowed to show. The implication made his throat tighten. The true number would remain hidden, perhaps double, perhaps more, each mark representing a life ended in silence. "How long have you been using this rifle?" Robert asked. "Long enough to know how it sings under every sky. Long enough to feel its recoil as part of my own breath. Long enough to understand that a weapon is not simply steel, it is memory and survival fused together." Robert swallowed hard, his mind flashing through years of service, the countless hours his own men had spent training for shots far less demanding, the staggering improbability of a single sniper who could deliver results across impossible distances. "You speak as if the weapon itself is alive," Robert said. Sophia's eyes softened slightly. "Perhaps it is. Perhaps the weapons we trust become more than tools. Perhaps they carry our sins and our salvations." The commander hesitated, his chest heavy with the weight of her words. He had carried weapons into battle. He knew the bond, but the way she described it went further, as though she and the rifle were inseparable. "And what about the cost?" Robert asked, his tone sharper now. "Do you ever question what this life has taken from you?" Sophia stilled, her hands resting gently on the stock. For a fleeting moment, Robert saw something break through her calm facade, the shadow of a memory, the glimmer of regret. "Every time I pull the trigger," she said quietly, "but questioning does not change necessity." Her voice was calm again, but Robert heard the truth beneath it. She carried weight heavier than any weapon. "What makes tomorrow necessary?" he asked. Sophia's jaw tightened. "Someone who threatens your people must be removed from the equation." The simplicity of her answer chilled him. No names, no details, just inevitability. Robert realized then he was speaking to someone who lived in absolutes, decisions reduced to survival or loss, existence or elimination. "Do you believe one person should carry that power?" he asked carefully. Sophia's eyes held his without flinching. "I do not believe in power. I believe in responsibility. Someone must take the shot others cannot. Someone must bear the silence." Her words echoed in him. Unsettling, undeniable. Robert lowered his arms, his resolve slipping. Everything about this encounter violated protocol. Yet he could not escape the growing respect tightening around his chest. Sophia radiated not arrogance, but an unshakable competence, the kind he had only glimpsed in the rarest of soldiers. He forced himself to ask, "And how many people know who you truly are?" "As few as necessary," she replied. "And how many need to know?" "Even fewer." Her answers dropped like stones into still water. No elaboration, no apology, just truth spoken plainly. Robert looked at the rifle, gleaming now as though reborn under her care. It was clear this weapon was hers, not by ownership, but by bond, by blood, by history written in silence. "You are a ghost," he said, not an accusation, but a realization. Sophia resumed her work with calm certainty. Ghosts are sometimes the only ones who can protect the living. Robert stood rooted, the weight of his uniform suddenly heavier, his world of clear orders and protocols cracking at the edges. In front of him was someone who operated beyond all of it, unseen, unacknowledged, yet perhaps more vital than any decorated officer. For the first time since stepping into the bay, Robert felt something unexpected, not fear, not anger, but a reluctant sense of awe. The rifle lay on the steel table like a puzzle nearly complete, fragments of death and precision aligned under Sophia's hands. Robert watched in silence, torn between the instinct to stop her and the strange pull to let her continue. Every movement she made carried a rhythm that no manual could teach. The barrel slid back into place, the scope adjusted by the smallest fraction. Her hands moved with the certainty of countless hours spent in the field. Robert had seen armorers work. He had seen elite snipers prepare their tools, but never with this intimacy. It was as though she was reassembling a part of herself. "You're not supposed to be here," Robert said again, though the edge in his voice was fading. "Authorization is paperwork," Sophia replied without looking up. "Capability is what saves lives." Robert felt his chest tighten. Those words defied the foundation of everything he had been taught, yet they rang with truth. He thought of men he had lost because of misfiled clearances, delayed decisions, orders trapped in red tape. He thought of moments when capability might have saved them if someone had acted without waiting for signature. Still, the other half of him resisted. Procedure existed for a reason, to prevent chaos, to protect against the misuse of power. He struggled with the clash of those worlds. "What is it you want from me?" Robert asked cautiously. Sophia tightened the final screw on the scope and finally looked up, her eyes steady. "I want you to ensure this conversation never happened, and if anyone asks, the rifle was serviced by authorized hands." Robert's fists clenched at his sides. "Do you know what you're asking?" "I know exactly what I am asking," she replied. For a moment, the silence grew heavy. Robert could hear his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. He imagined the fallout if this ever came to light. Hearings, investigations, his career torn apart. Yet he also imagined the alternative, ignoring her, raising alarms, and perhaps dooming an operation he knew nothing about, an operation that might decide lives. He studied her face, searching for arrogance, for deception. But all he found was the unshakable calm of someone who lived each day in the shadows of impossible decisions. "You speak as if the shot you prepare for is inevitable," Robert said slowly. "It is," Sophia answered. "Missing it would mean American personnel never come home." The certainty in her voice left no space for argument. Robert felt the same cold sensation he had felt before every high-risk mission. That edge of knowing lives balanced on a blade. "How many times have you done this?" he asked. "Long enough to know the rifle's signature in every environment, long enough to breathe through the wind, long enough to stop counting." The words carried both pride and exhaustion. Robert realized then he was speaking not just to a sniper, but to someone who had become a legend in silence, a figure written only in rumors and redacted files. "Tell me why you do it," Robert pressed. "Why accept a life that leaves no recognition?" Sophia's hands paused on the stock, her expression unreadable because someone must. Her answer carried no flourish, no justification, just inevitability. Robert let out a slow breath. He had spent his career in the rigid comfort of rules, but now he faced someone who existed beyond them. And for the first time, he wondered if perhaps the system depended on people like her, the unseen, the unnamed, the ghosts. He felt a strange respect stirring in him, though it clashed with duty, and against all his instincts he asked, "Is there anything I can do to help?" For the first time since he had entered the bay, Sophia smiled, a subtle expression that softened her entire demeanor. "Yes," she said quietly, "you can trust me, and keep my presence between us." Robert found himself nodding before he could stop. It felt reckless, yet something inside told him it was the only choice that mattered. He watched as she lifted the completed rifle, the weapon now whole and gleaming. Not just steel, but an extension of her very being. She slung it into its case with practiced ease, the weight of 30 pounds carried as lightly as a handbag. Robert extended his hand without thinking. Sophia accepted it, her grip firm, her palm scarred, the shake not of strangers but of two soldiers who had both lived with impossible choices. "Sophia," Robert said, "make the shot count." She gave the faintest smile. "Every shot counts. Commander, tomorrow's only counts more than most." As she turned and walked toward the exit, Robert felt a heaviness settle in him. He knew nothing of her mission, yet he sensed the world would hinge on her silence and her precision, and that his role now was not to stop her, but to protect the secret she carried. Robert remained in the maintenance bay long after Sophia's footsteps had faded, the silence pressing against him heavier than any weight of armor. The rifle's scent of oil and steel still lingered in the air, reminding him of the ghost who had walked out without alarms, without recognition, leaving only questions that would never have official answers. He returned to the terminal, the glow of the classified files still on screen. 73 confirmed eliminations, 3,200 meters recorded as maximum engagement. Numbers that read like myth. He stared at them until the lines blurred. Then he initiated the erasure protocol, wiping all evidence of the access, burying the truth deeper than before. Some part of him whispered that this was betrayal, that he was shielding an intruder. Yet another part knew he had made the only choice possible. If Sophia had been telling the truth, then her work was not meant for daylight. It was meant for shadows. 36 hours later, Robert sat his office as news broke across the world. International networks buzzing with reports of a failed attack on American diplomatic personnel. Commentators speculated. Officials released careful statements. Coalition forces credited with eliminating a high-value target. No details given, no explanations offered. Robert leaned back in his chair, the faint smile of Sophia echoing in his mind. He knew, without question, that she had been there, somewhere unseen, pressing her cheek to the stock of that rifle, breathing through impossible wind, pulling a trigger that carried the weight of nations, and no one would ever speak her name. He thought of her words. Every shot counts, tomorrow's counts more. They echoed now as prophecy fulfilled. Robert left his office and walked the secure halls, the world around him unchanged, men and women in uniform carrying out their duties, unaware that a ghost had shifted the course of history from the shadows, unaware that someone had stood in the bay with him, steady hands cleaning a rifle that could alter the balance of war. That night he found himself unable to sleep, memories circling like hawks, her calm eyes, her scarred hands, her refusal to offer more than fragments. She had asked him only for trust, and against everything he had been trained to do, he had given it. He wondered if she was safe, wondered if safety was even a concept she allowed herself, he thought of her answer. Safety is not a luxury people in my position can afford. She had spoken truth, her life measured not by survival, but by completion, by lives saved through the silence of her trigger. Weeks passed, then months. Whispers drifted among units of a figure, never named, never confirmed, a sniper who appeared where no one should, who made impossible shots and vanished before questions could form. Some laughed it off as rumor. Others swore they had heard enough fragments to believe. Robert said nothing. He kept the memory locked within. Sophia became a ghost story, one of those whispered in barracks and mess halls, a myth to remind soldiers that unseen guardians might walk among them. Robert carried it differently. For him, she was no myth. She was a reality that had shaken his understanding of service, of secrecy, of sacrifice. She had reminded him that wars are not only fought by those whose names appear on rosters and medals, but also by those who cannot exist, those who bear the weight of silence. One evening he returned to the maintenance bay, standing in the place where he had first found her. The tables empty now, the hum of lights steady, yet he could almost see her there, auburn hair tied back, hands steady, eyes dark as night, reassembling steel with the reverence of a priest. He closed his eyes, hearing again her words. Ghosts are sometimes the only ones who can protect the living. Perhaps that was true. Perhaps some battles could only be fought by those denied the comfort of recognition. Perhaps history itself required shadows. Robert walked away from the bay, his uniform crisp, his expression unreadable, carrying a secret that no report would ever hold. He understood now that some truths belonged to silence, and some heroes belonged to darkness. Somewhere in the world, Sophia carried her rifle, waiting for the next time her skill would be demanded, waiting to reach across impossible distance to save lives that would never know she had been their shield. Robert would never see her name in print, never read her deeds in history. Yet he would always remember the day he met the ghost sniper, the woman who existed only in shadows, the soldier who carried responsibility heavier than nations. And in the silence of that memory, he found respect. Not the respect written in medals or rank, but the quiet reverence for someone who bore the burden that others could not, someone who would never be known, yet who mattered more than most.